I'm Bub Smith. You're watching Bluegrass Legends. Today's guest is Tinsley Wetmore. Tinsley is a real life hero who risked her life on July the 27th, 2022, when she was only 18 years old. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. On that date, many Knott Countyans and thousands of other folks from surrounding counties went to bed late that night with little or no idea that an impending and catastrophic flood was brewing, a flood that would forever alter the lives of Eastern Kentuckians. Tinsley here is going to tell her story. It's a story of heroic selflessness and unwavering courage. Tinsley, let's go back to that evening.
So it had been raining like a lot, that probably the whole month, but like it normally does.
The whole month?
I think like it had been raining, like, you know, in the summer we just get so much rain. And so it was normal for the creeks to be like up, and we just didn't pay it a lot of attention. And so it was like not dangerously high, but it was like up some.
So had you seen it where it was up before?
Yeah, like it was still in like the creek bank, but you know, we always kind of kept an eye on it because our horses are down there. Yeah. And so it was like, you know, muddy and like it was quick, but we would have like a lot of rain and then be sunny and we'd have like breaks. And so I guess it had some breaks during the day, and it was bedtime, and it like, you know, had rain in the forecast. And since it was already up a little bit, we were kind of like watching it closer because it was going into night, and that's usually when it would really flood. And we had our neighbors down there who would always keep an eye on it, and they would call us and be like, hey, it's up in the pasture, you need to get your horses or whatever. But like around 11 probably, we got a flash flood alert. And so my grandparents were up in Indiana, so I was at the house by myself. And my aunt, who helps me with the horses, was up on Clear Creek. Mm-hmm. And so she was calling me, and she was like, hey, like, how's the creek looking?
So for people who don't know, and I'm sorry to interrupt
you're good.
Clear Creek is what from here? What? How many miles does your aunt live here from you here?
It's probably like 10 or 15 minutes. She kept calling down, and she was like, you need to go check on the water. And so I'd get up out of bed, and I'd drive, and I was like, well, it looks fine. And I went up the road a little bit to where normally it would flood first, and I didn't see anything. Like, it was up, but not really concerned. And so I went back to bed, and then she'd call me like 20 minutes later, like, hey, go look. And so eventually we decided, like, let's just put them up. And so she made her way down the hill, and I could hear, like, I sleep with the fan on in my room, and I could hear the rain over the fan, and I was like, man, like, that's rain, like, it's pretty hard.
Gosh.
And so I was just kind of like laying there. I had just, I guess, gotten back in from checking the water, and she got down here, and she walked in, and she said that she could tell, like, as she was driving down, the creek was, like, chasing her, like, it just getting bigger and bigger as she was going. And so she said, like, she was beating it down here. And so she was like, well, we need to go, like, down there and get the horses up before it catches us down here. And so at that point, it was raining really hard. Like, there wasn't a break at that point. And so, like, where we live up on this hill, we have that, like, drain to keep stuff off our driveway. And she needed to get out and, like, unclog it because we had, like, a bunch of leaves blocking it. And so we went outside, and I normally wear contacts, but I put glasses on because I was like, it'll just take a minute. Terrible decision. But so I put my glasses on, and we took my grandparents' car because it has leather seats, and we were like, oh, it'll be easy to drive. And so we got in, and I took her down, and I actually got a video of it because I was like, this is funny. Like, I got a video of her unclogging the drain. Yeah.
At this point, y'all had no idea how bad this was.
No, I mean, like, we could tell it was raining, but again, like, it's normal for it to rain. It had been raining, like, and then it'll stop and it'll rain. So it wasn't a big deal. And so she was there just, like, unclogging it, and I got the video, and she said, well, I'm too wet. I'm just going to walk to the horses. And I said, okay. So I went down, and I pulled to where the neighbors are because they live, like, at the end of the lane, and I turned so that we could see all the horses in the barn.
So you put like your headlights on the...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so I faced it out so we could see the horses, and I had just been down there checking on them not long at all before, but at that point when I got there, it was already like halfway up in the pasture.
The water?
Mm-hmm. And so it had gotten like way up within like a few minutes of her getting there. So I was like, whoa, like, okay. And so I got out, and we had 7 horses at the time. And so one of them was up on like the barn level in a fence, so we didn't have to worry about her. But we had to get the 6 out of the water. And so we went and we were like catching 2 of them. I caught my horse and she got one of hers. And my horse was like shaking. He was so scared. And I was like, this is weird, because like we've never really had it like that quick, and the horses have never been like that scared. And so I got him out and we put him up, and we had to clean out my grandparents' gardening stall for one of the horses. And so that took a while, because by the time we got down to get 2 of the other horses, it was already like all the way up in their pasture. And they were like running it. They were freaking out. And so I was walking, and they're just like running through this water, like totally panicking. And so we were able to get 4 out of the water. And then
4 out of the 6?
Yeah.
Was it 6? Yeah.
And the other 2, by the time we got back down for them, it was already up in the road, like where the car was at. And they were just too scared. Like, they would not let us catch them. I was trying to get feed and like shake it, and you couldn't hear it over the rain. Like, I got a little bucket of feed, and by the time I got there, it was full of water. Like, you couldn't hear the feed shaking. It was full.
Gosh.
And it was just raining so hard. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was freaking out because I thought like I was going to lose my horses. And so I remember walking too, like on the road, trying to figure out how to get them out. And I just looked down like at my boots. And every time I'd pick my foot up, the creek was just pulling me. And I was like, this is bad. Like, this is really bad. And so
at that point right there, were you in fear for your life yet or not?
No, I don't. Like, I realized like if I fall, like this could, but I still had a safe spot to go at that point. Like, I could still get to higher ground.
Okay.
And so I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to catch them, and I'm not going to keep standing here in this water. And so I just threw the fence down. And I was like, I hope they can figure it out. Because then we realized our car is getting flooded, because we had parked out on the road, and the water was up in the road. And so we were like, what do we do? And my aunt said, let's just pull it in the stall that we had cleaned out, because water's never gotten in our barn. We were like, this is like the safest spot for it. We don't want to drive it through the water to get it back up on the hill. And so we drove it into the barn, which is like, if here's the pasture, here's the road, the barn's like way up here. And that's where our neighbor's house seat was.
Okay.
And so we put those 4 horses in the barn. We still had one that was safe, like in the pasture. And we put the car in the barn. And people were calling us like, hey, did you get your horses? Like, have you seen the water's up? And I was like, yeah, we're down here right now. My aunt was calling my grandparents who were up in Indiana and telling them like the situation. And so we just kind of sat there and waited just to see what would happen. Because again, it's never like gotten into our barn. And so we waited and it just kept getting higher and higher. And I was like, we need to go. And my aunt was like, no, it'll stop. She said, it'll be fine. Like, she's like, it won't get in our barn. And I was like, I don't know. And so we waited, and it started, because, you know, it was raining so hard still at that point, and water started coming off of the hill too. And so we had it coming up from the creek and off of the hill. And so I had my phone for like our flashlight. That's what we were using. And I was holding a flashlight, and I was like, we need to go. Like, water is starting to get under our feet here. And I was like, we're going to die, like, if we stay here. I said, we need to just turn the horses loose. Like, they can swim out. I said, we just got to go.
So at that point, you really were starting to fear that
I
was
freaking out. And I was like, we got to just, like, climb up the hill or something. I said, like, we can't just stay here. And she said, well, hang on. And so she started going through the barn, and she was trying to get stuff that she thought was going to float away. And I said, we have to go. I was like, let's go. And I was like, just open the stalls. But she was like, okay, we'll get the horses. And so I had my phone, and I was holding the light, and she got 2 of them, and I was holding them. And they started attacking each other. And I was like, this is a terrible time. And so they started jumping up on top of each other, and all I had was my hand with my flashlight in it. I popped them on the head. I was like, stop. Like, this is not the time. And they're like literally jumping on top of each other, and I dropped my phone.
Oh, no.
And I was like, I dropped my phone. And she said, hurry, get it. And I started like feeling through the water because at that point the water was probably like ankle deep. And I started feeling, I was freaking the horses out. They're trying to kick me. I was like, whatever, I said, forget it. And she said, are you sure? And I was like, forget it, we have to go. I was like, we have got to get out of here. She said, okay.
Where did you drop your phone?
I dropped it like by that black roll.
So right over there, she dropped the phone and then found it over here by the barrels a month later?
Yeah, we had like brought a little dozer in, and I guess we dozed it up in the dirt pile and the horses found it.
And it still works today?
Yep. I still use it when my other one is like down.
That's awesome. Is it an iPhone or Android or what?
iPhone.
That's
An
pretty.
OtterBox.
There you go. Get you an OtterBox.
And so we got the 4 horses that we had, and we had to make it through my grandma's garden in order to get out. And it was full of like tomato cages. She had like wires everywhere. And I was like, oh my gosh. And like
that was the only route you could take?
Yeah. Because like behind our barn is basically straight up. And the horses, I don't think, could have made it.
And people who are watching this and don't realize what she's saying, we're going to show you in a few minutes with a video. Yeah. When she says straight up, you mean straight up.
Yeah, because, yeah, it's like a drop-off, basically.
No way to climb that, probably on a dry day.
You got to do, like, hands and knees.
And then you add the water that she's talking about. It's impossible. So you had to go through the garden.
Yeah. And, like, the horses were still kind of freaking out because, like, they've never really experienced this. And stuff was touching their feet.
Yeah.
And I was like, they're going to drag us and, like, they're going to get tangled up. Like, something terrible is going to happen. And so we just went really slow. And my aunt was in front of me, and she had little, like, hoof nippers. And she was trying to cut wire and move it. And I was like, oh, my gosh. I was like, this is terrible. Like, what's happening? And it just kept getting higher and higher. And all we had for a flashlight was, like, the lightning. And so every like couple of seconds, because like it was thundering and lightning awful, so every couple of seconds it would lighten and we'd look out and the water was like on the same level as us. Gosh. And it was just this huge like brown like rolling, like it didn't even really look like water. It was crazy.
Was it raging?
Oh yeah. It was like it was just going past us, and we had like a bunch of dressers, wood, like you just saw these huge things floating. Just
debris coming down the creek?
And I bet a lot of it was like porches and stuff, like now thinking about it. And by the time we got out of the garden, we saw this like flashing thing rolling past us. And we're like, what the heck? And the horses were kind of like, you know, they were already freaked out. And then we had this, and I was like, they're going to like kill us. And we were watching, and it was the neighbor's car. It was their car. And it had like the emergency blinkers going on.
Gosh.
And
was anybody in it?
Okay. No, it was just their car, and like it was kind of like rolling, and it took us a minute to figure out what it was, and I was like, golly, because like a whole car, like it picked it up and it was packing it. I was like, okay. And so at that point, I'd say I think it was in my boots. Like I had water over my boots, which are about at my knee, and I was like, man. And by the time we got to where the other horse was, the 2 that were still in the pasture had gotten up, and so we had all of our horses with us at that point. But in order to get from like this level to our driveway, we had to go through a dip. And she was like, okay, it's going to get like really deep here, like don't freak out. And it was chest deep on me whenever we got through that. And so she started leading, and all the horses were following us. And so she got there with the ponies, and you know, they couldn't touch the ground, and that really freaked him out. Yeah. And they jumped up on top of each other and jumped on top of her.
On top of your aunt?
Yes, on top of my aunt. And so she disappeared. Like, I had no idea what was happening with her. My horse pulled me up, like, into some raspberry bushes, like, pulled me up on the hill a little bit. And so I got out of the water, and I was, like, scraped up, but I was live. And so I was like, okay. And so I got over to our driveway, and I was looking around, and I was like, where's she at? 'Cause all I saw was just, like, this brown glob of, like, it was just water. And I was like, where did she go? And I didn't really know what to do at that point. I think I was probably in shock. I was just like, oh my gosh, like I made it out. We were walking down here, and once the horses got to where they couldn't touch anymore, they jumped, and she went underwater to the driveway.
How deep was it right here?
It was up to me about on my chest, but I didn't get to down here because my horse put me up in those bushes.
Is that where you were at up there?
Mm-hmm.
Where did she resurface? Do you remember?
It was just over here, like right in the middle of the driveway. She said that she had gone under and she could feel the ground. And so she was feeling, and once she got our blacktop, she just started crawling. And so she eventually reappeared, and she came up like trying to throw up water and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that was crazy. And I was just like, okay, well, let's like go. And so we started walking up the hill, and I was like, well, what are we going to do about the horses? Because I didn't know if we could still get them. I was like, there's got to be something we can do. And she's like, well, no. Like, they're just going to have to swim. Like, we can't do anything now.
At this point, it's
Yeah.
you or the horses.
Yeah, like, we barely made it out, like, with the horses. And so the best option at that point was just leave them because we didn't want to have another, like, dunking episode. And so we had gotten about halfway up the driveway. Like, I'd gotten into the, like, wooded part. And I felt safe enough. And so me and my horse stopped. And he was, like, still kind of nervous. He was, like, checking me out. He was, like, smelling on me. And I said, well, what about our neighbors? I was like, what? Because, you know, they're on the same level that we just got off of. And it was already, like, chest deep in some parts. And so I was like, what are we going to do about them? And she said, well, they watched the water closer than us. So they probably saw it and got out. Thinking back, we saw their car floating. So they, like, you know, but I was like, okay. Like, I was just happy I was out. And so I was like, okay, I mean, I guess. And so we walked up the hill, and we had only gotten one horse out. We'd only gotten mine because he had pulled me out of the water. And so we had tied him up, and we took turns, like, giving ourselves, like, a pool bath. Like, we dunked in the pool because we wouldn't get the water off of us. And at some point, my grandma had called and woken my mom up because she'd just been asleep through all this. She had no idea what was happening. And so once we were, like, showered, kind of, we walked back down to the horse, and my mom came down. She's like, what's going on? And so we told her, and she was like, well, I think we had a break in the rain at that point, if I remember. I mean, it's been, you know, a long time. But I think at that point, because we were just kind of all standing out there. And then it started to rain again, because, like, it was kind of, like, raining really hard, and then you'd have, like, a little break.
So round 2 was coming.
Yeah. And so we had a little bit of a break. And once it started raining again, we brought the horse up here into the carport so that we could be dry. We didn't want to leave him by himself because we didn't want him to, like, try to go back to the others. And so we were sitting up here, and my mom got little lawn chairs for us to sit out with the horse. And we even got some snacks, and we were just sitting out there snacking.
What time is this?
Oh, I didn't have my phone. I know that my mom had been calling, but probably like 1
1
or
in
2.
the morning?
1 or 2, probably. Again, I'm not positive, but maybe 1 or 2. And so we had been able to get a hold of my grandparents and be like, hey, we made it out. My aunt had called the police because she said, hey, like, we have 6 horses that got swept away in a flood. Like, we didn't know everybody was flooding. We were just like, you know, they got swept away. They're probably going to come out on a highway. So if you guys see anything, like, let us know. And they said, nobody's driving tonight. Get to higher ground. And we were like, what? Like, what do you mean? Because, again, it didn't really click for us. Like, everybody's experiencing this. And so we were like...
You had no clue the magnitude at this point.
So we were like, okay. Like, we were like, well, just let us know if you see them. And they said, okay. And at that point, my mom also posted on her Facebook. And she was like, hey, like, our horses got swept away. If anybody sees them, let us know. And so we were just sitting up here, and, like, we were talking about it. Like, talking about how big the creek was and, like, how that was weird, like, what would have caused that. And we have a full house generator over at my grandparents' house. And so the power had kicked off at that point. And the generator was running, and we had our porch light on. And so we were sitting over here, like, snacking, talking about it. And I was like, I think we should go check on our neighbors. I was like, I think that we should just make sure. They're like, well, they probably, like, would have let us know. Because, again, they usually call us. And it turns out they did call us at, like, 1-ish, maybe 12:30, 1. Like, when the water was high, they noticed they called us. And we had the message on our phone over there. But where we were already, like, in it and we were outside, we didn't pick up the phone. We didn't know. And so anyway, they were like, no, I'm sure that they knew. And so we were sitting there, and I noticed somebody came up on our porch. And I was like, hey, there's somebody at our house. They said, what? And so we got up, and we took off running over there. And we're like, hey, we're over here. And I recognized him because, you know, I'd seen him, like, growing up. And I was like, oh, I know who that is. And so it was one of the neighbor's grandsons. And he was really, like, he was out of breath. We didn't know what was going on. He was like, oh, my gosh. He was like, there's people on the hill. And we're like, what? He said, there's people on the hill. We need help.
People on the hill?
Mm-hmm. And I was like, there's people? I was like, people need help getting up the hill? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And so he said he didn't think he could even make it up. And he was like, I can't go back down there. He said, I can't. He was like so tired. Like he was in shock. And he was like, I can't. And we said, okay, well, we need you to show us where they are. And he's like, oh, he's agreed. And he was like, okay. And so I was asking, I was like, do we need a rope? Like, what do we need to get him up? I was like, do they need us to drag him up? Like, what's happening? And maybe he said, like, yeah, they would. And so he started taking my aunt and my mom down, and I ran and got a rope because I was just like, I'm going to take it in case. And so I ran up on the porch and got it, and I ran down, like, in front of them, and I saw people, like, with lights on their heads and, like, screaming. I heard screaming. They're, like, screaming for help. And I got down there, like, we're here, like, what do you need? And let me see, I think there were 7 total.
7 people?
In that house, yep. And so they had gotten, the 2 grandsons were able to get themselves and the son of their grandparents and his wife out. And so...
leaving 3 in the house. Yes.
They couldn't get the little boy. He wouldn't go without his grandpa. And when they tried to get his grandpa, a rock had, like, fallen and hit him. And they didn't have, like, they couldn't get him up the hill. And so...
So their house was located on the other side of the creek?
No, it was, like, on the same side, like, where our barn was. Okay. But at that point...
But on the same level as the barn up there? Okay.
And I think they said they had waited until the water was, like, up in their house, in their couch, before they had decided to try to get out. Yeah.
Wow.
And so they had gotten, like, the 4. They've gotten 4 of them out. And we were like, okay, well, like, what do we need to do? And we heard screaming from in the house. And we're like, there's people in the house? Like, we didn't know that. Like, nobody told us that. And so we were like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like, we didn't really have, like, we didn't know how to help them. And so the people that they had gotten out were up, like, it was still a hillside, but it was, like, safer, I guess. Because then it goes, like, here's the hill, and it, like, drops off, and then here's water. And so I got my rope, and I tied it to, like, where the, I guess, top of the drop-off was. And I went down to a tree that was basically in the water.
So, like, we're standing here where Tinsley started down this hill. And if you can see way, way over there is the road. If that kind of puts it in perspective for you.
And I got my aunt down there. Like, we all got down there. And I was like, well, how are we going to get him? Like, my aunt is not a strong swimmer, and they didn't want me to go across. And so she held onto the rope, and she tried to swim across. And, of course, didn't work. Like, this water is, like, so fast.
So from where you were standing to their house, how wide was that? What are we talking? How many feet, you think?
Ooh.
Roughly. Is it 10 feet or 20 feet maybe?
It was probably 20-ish feet.
20 feet of raging water between you guys?
And again, there were, like, dressers and trees and, like, everything just
How deep do you have any clue how deep the water could have been when it was raging at that point? Because you already said it was out of the creek bank, right, at that point?
Yeah. I have a picture on my phone. I'd say it was probably at least 10 or 12 foot. Gosh, probably at least.
Which would easily be taller than any human.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And so she was trying to swim across to him, and she couldn't do it. And I was like, well, I have pool floaties. I was like, we had our pool set up, and I was like, do I need to go get the pool floaties? Like, what do we need to do? And my mom had gone back up here to her house at that point, and I think she was letting people make some phone calls. Yeah. And so she had come up here, and I was like, I'm going to go. We have life jackets. My mom has life jackets in the basement. And so I ran up the hill, and I was like, oh, my gosh, like, I'm going too slow. I was out of breath.
You run up the driveway or the hill?
No, the hill. Oh, wow. And I was, like, trying to run as fast as I could, but I was, like, so exhausted. And I was like, oh, my gosh, like, I'm taking too long. I was like, you know, because time was of the essence. And I was like, we're not going to be able to do it.
This is so steep. You went down this way, right? Mm-hmm. All the way down to where the other 7 individuals were that needed help, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And it actually, like, dropped off.
Okay. Can we go down here just a little further? Mm-hmm. If I fall, this is going to be on camera. You'll have something to laugh at. So it was covered. It was raining really hard as you're coming down through here. Yeah. Pitch black. Could you hear the water from here?
Oh, yeah. Because it was all of that you can see now was just covered.
All of that was water?
Yeah, all in the bottom.
Oh my God.
All of that was just covered up down there. And then, I want to say...
A lot of people don't know how steep these hills in Knott County really are. Good grief. Yeah, so over there is the main road. You can see the cars. And the water, you can see the creek right there. So the creek was up in the road?
Yep.
My God.
And it actually got up into our barn loft in our barn.
Where's the barn? That way?
So I got up here and I got my mom and I stood at the door while she ran and she got life jackets and some more ropes for us. And so I ran those back off the hill, and at that point my mom was like, what are you guys doing? Like, I don't want you going in the water. I was like, well, like, we don't really have an option. And so we went back down, and we had gotten flashlights at this point. We had, like, I think maybe some headlamps and, like, a big flashlight that would shine across to where the house was. And they had put a little lantern on their porch post so that we could kind of see what was going on in the house.
The people that were trying to be rescued?
Yes, our neighbors, yeah. So they had put in a lantern over on their porch, and so like we could sort of see what was happening over there.
So you had a point of reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I got back down there, and my aunt was still like talking to him, and she was like, "We're gonna try to get you out. Like, we're gonna try to do what we can." And their son was like, "Please get my mommy and daddy out. Like, you need to get my daddy. He's too weak. He can't make it. Like, you need to get him first." And he was like the whole
just
time.
very concerned for
the whole time he was just yelling like, "Please get him out. They're all that I have." And so we were trying to kind of like calm him down. We're like, "It's going to be okay. Like, we're going to do our best." And so we got down there, and my mom had followed me, and she was down there, and I got back like right above the water to like my little tree. And she was like, "Tinsley, I don't want you down there." And she's like yelling at me, and she was like crying. She said, like, "This is too dangerous. Like, I need you to get back up here." And I was like, "Mom, like, we're not doing that." And so she was frantic at that point, and she was trying to call 911. And they were like, "We can't get to you. Like, we're not doing anything. You need to get to higher ground." And she was like, "What? Like, what do you mean?" 'Cause again,
let me interrupt you real quick. As a parent, I just want you, I can only imagine what your mother was going through.
Yes. And so, we put a life jacket on my aunt, and I think my mom wanted me to wear a life jacket, but I was like, there wasn't enough. And so to make her feel better, I tied myself to the tree that I was sitting on, and I was like, "Here, like, I'm tied, I'm not going to fall in."
How big was, I read that in the book. How round was this tree? What are we talking, a huge tree?
It was probably like this round,
so
maybe.
you really risk your life on a tree that was in the water that's...
It was a little tree, and it is not, like, you can see the roots. Like, it is not in the ground well. Gosh. And so I was like, "Here, like, I'm tied, like, it'll be okay." And she was just like crying, and she was frantic. And we told her, we were like, "If you can't calm down, you have to go back to the house." We said, like, "You are not helping." Like, everybody was screaming, you know. We were like, "If you can't calm down, go back up the hill." And she's like, "Okay." And so from that point on, she's kind of like, she calmed herself down, and she tried to help. And so my aunt was, you know, she couldn't swim across. And so the best she could think to do was tie the life jacket to one of these big long ropes that we had. And she started just throwing it across. Yeah. But again, the water was just, it was too strong, and it just kept like taking it across, like taking it down. And she was having really bad shoulder problems at that point. And I kind of told her, I was like, "Aunt Sarah, like, we need to get this done." Because the water, I think when we got in there, was probably about waist deep. And it was probably getting like chest deep at that point.
That fast?
Yeah, in their house.
Oh, gosh.
And I was like, "We need to, like, get them, like, before it's too late." I was like, "We have to hurry." And she said, "Well, I'm trying, like, I'm doing as best as I can." And so she just couldn't make it across. And her shoulder was hurting her, and we were like, "This is a disaster." And I just sat there, and I was like, "Oh, my gosh." Like, I just kind of had, like, this bad feeling. I was like, I don't know if this is going to go well. And my mom had called my grandma sometime during this up in Indiana, and she was like, "We need you guys to pray for us." Like, she told them the situation. And so she woke like a bunch of people up, and they were all up there praying for us. And so she had probably thrown it like 5 or 8 times. Like, she'd thrown it a lot and had no luck. And so she told them, like, "You're going to have to grab it with something." She said, "Is there anything in the house that you can use to reach out and grab it?" And they had a hoe, like a gardening hoe, in their little room. And so the grandma had to step out on the porch, and, you know, that's very scary. Like, she was getting out. They were in, like, their little laundry room, which is safe-ish. and she had to step out like into the water. And so she got the hoe and she was reaching out and she caught it. And she pulled it over and she had to walk upstream to where the lantern was on their porch and tie it up for my aunt. And so she got it tied, and my aunt started to go across, and I had that rope tied to my tree also. And so I was in charge of holding it tight enough that she didn't fall in the water.
Right.
And so I wrapped it up and I was holding it real tight, and she started going across, and she had her own rope just in case she fell off.
So your aunt's going across the rope at this time?
Yes, my aunt's going across, and she took some extra life jackets so she could put life jackets on everybody.
Because there's 3 people still over there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so she started going across, and again, it took a while. Stuff was hitting her legs. It was trying to take her down the stream, and so she got over to the porch, and she had to have the grandma drag her in. She got her leg up over top of the railing, and she had to have her drag her over. And so she got over there, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's going a little bit better. And she gets in there, and the life jackets took forever because, everybody was panicking. They couldn't see that well.
Imagine.
They had them on, upside down, twisted, and I was like, what's taking so long? We need to get out.
And also, remember, it's pitch black, right?
Mm-hmm. Other than, the little flashlights and stuff.
Yeah, so, this is a raging flood.
Mm-hmm.
It's very dark. It's very time, like you said, time was really, really relevant. Mm-hmm. It's a very critical situation.
Yeah. And so, and at that point, they were screaming again, get my daddy. He's the weakest. You need to get him out. And he wouldn't go. The grandpa would not go. Because he had already tried to make her cross, and he was like, I can't do it again. I can't do it again. And the grandma wouldn't go because she wanted the grandson. And so we were like, well, and he was only 11. Yeah. And so we were like, well, you're going to have to go. And he didn't really want to leave him. Right. But my aunt made him go. And she got him over, and he was a big, he was as big as her, if not bigger. And so she gets him, and she's like, hey, this is going to be really scary. The water is going to be tugging at you. Don't freak out. And so she gets him out, and it's very scary. And he starts trying to go back to the house. And so she had to push him all the way across the water. And the whole time they were yelling, everybody was cheering him on. We're like, you can do that. Come on, just get to me, get to me. And so eventually she finally makes it over to me with him, and I start trying to drag him up, out of the water. And he keeps sliding, and he's in a thorn bush, and he's like, there's nothing I can grab onto. He said, I can't do it. And we're like, yes, you can. I was like, you don't have another option. I said, come on. And so I get up, and I'm dragging him, and my aunt's trying to put her feet, her hands and stuff, to scoop him up. And I said, what are you wearing? Because he just kept sliding. I said, what's on your feet? And he's like, Crocs. I was like, no. I said, you have to take those off. I said, you need to take your foot and kick it off. Yeah. And he didn't, he loves Crocs, I think. And he was like, he didn't want to do it. And I was like, kick your shoes off. Yeah. And so we ripped him off of his feet. And we got him up to where I was at. And then my mom was up, on the safer part of the hillside. And so I pushed him, up to her, and we managed to get him up. And the grandparents were like, did he make it? And we said, yeah. And then the light I think was going dim, and we heard a knock. And I was like, what on earth? And I turned around, and my tree started swaying with me.
You were tied to it still?
Mm-hmm. And my tree was swaying. I was like, oh, they're coming over. I said, they're coming over. And they were like, oh, they are? And so I grabbed a hold of the string I was supposed to be holding him across over. And it just kept tugging me and tugging me. And I was trying to squeeze the rope with my hands and everything, my legs. I was just wrapped around it. And it just kept tugging me more and more. And I was like, they don't weigh that much. I was like, what's happening? And we heard it just, all this cracking. And the house just disappeared. And we were like, oh my gosh. And so I kind of sat there and I looked and I said, I'm tied to this tree. And so my aunt is trying to get up out of the water. My mom's kind of trying to deal with the little boy. And so we start trying to rip the rope off of me. And I was like, I'm going to go with this house. And so we're just ripping, tugging, and we jump up to the safety-ish part. And surprisingly, the tree actually is still there. I thought for sure it would go with the house because it had the whole, all the weight on it.
To put that in perspective, once again, there's the road where the vehicle's going right now. There's the creek bank. The water was up so high that it was over here. Tinsley, you said it was at that tree where you were standing?
It was, yeah, it was maybe like a few feet underneath it.
So about where the top of this 10 is?
Yeah, about there.
So the water was like to the top of that 10, all the way over. Unbelievable. The tree that she was tied to.
Was this one, like the closest to us right here.
That one right there.
And then the one up above with a bottle in it is like the flat-ish part that we were trying to get people up. So we got up there and everybody was making their way like back up to the house, and we had to help the son and his wife because they were like in shock. The son was blind, and so like we had to help them, and we had to like take their hands because like I guess we had the lights, and we had to put them on like little trees or roots that they could touch, and then we had to like use our feet and like just crawl them up the whole hill. And I was like, I don't know if we're gonna make it up here, but slowly but surely we did. And I saw like our house light, and I was like, oh my gosh, like thank goodness. And at that point, since we thought, well, my aunt had gotten life jackets on everybody, we thought like, oh, maybe they'll be okay. And so we gave everybody like a bucket bath out of our pool, and we got them dry clothes and stuff. And the next morning, at some point, I don't know, like I didn't have my phone, but sometime when it was daylight, we went down, like, and the water was down enough that we could go check on like the neighbors on this side, but they aren't really in the flood zone. And so we just went to check and see if they were okay, and we saw their grandparents' house, like right in the other neighbor's yard. And they're like, oh, we need to go check. And we're like, no, like, it's probably too muddy. Like, I think that we should wait. And
you already knew, obviously.
Yeah, well, we weren't for sure. We had seen on Facebook that people in life jackets were clinging to telephone poles, like because my mom could use hers. But we later found out that they were still in that house, in like the same room we'd seen them in. And so we're glad that we didn't let them go look. But yeah.
What's the area we're in right now? Is this Montgomery, or what do you call this?
Feisty.
Feisty. So it's safe to say that Feisty was one of the hardest hit areas, right?
I think we lost like a lot in this. Like, I think overall it was like 28. That was like the total for the flood, but
in Knott County alone,
I think, like there was a high number just in this community.
Yeah, that's what like
a very high number.
This is a very small community compared to the actual size of all the counties that were affected by the flood. So just this little area right here really got it pretty bad.
So you can see the creek right there, and you see that bridge. The water was over that bridge and into the roadway here. It was over the road here.
But it just shows her bravery. You could have sat up here that night and just stayed here and ate your snacks, but you decided you went on a mission, you and Sarah and your mother, and definitely a hero because there's a little boy that's still alive today and getting to live the rest of his life because of her and her aunt and mother and God.
So the water was in the loft of that barn, if you can imagine that. "39 people died in Kentucky Over 20 of those were in Knott County. 11 in Feisty alone. Tinsley has gotten on with her life, but she continues to reflect on that day as expected.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.